Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome. And thank you so very much for being with us. It is an honor, privilege, and pleasure to have you here on this journey with two of my favorite people on the planet. If you've gotten to know me and you've been a part of the Positive Prime community, you'll know that I adore and respect Professor Stephen G. Post. It is a rare opportunity we get to spend this precious time with him. And I'm delighted that Benny and I get to have a gorgeous conversation with a gorgeous human being. And so I'm going to hand it over to Benny because he'll do a more formal introduction, and hang in there because I think in the next hour, you're going to learn so much about who you really are and the role that you're here to play, the contribution you can make that is much more meaningful and significant on a very important subject. What we're discussing is significant. Hang in there and then go out there and be this magnificent change that you can be in the world. Over to you, Benny.
Thanks, Kim. What a wondrous introduction as well. I can never beat it, this formal introduction. Welcome, Dr. Stephen. For over 20 years, Dr. Stephen G. Post has been spreading the science of giving and the commitment to the greater good. He has promoted the idea of give and live better across the globe, funding over 50 scientific studies at the nation's top universities, as well as conducting much of his own research. Dr. Stephen brings a new level of insight into the ways in which we benefit as givers and a whole lot of practical advice, I'm sure we'll get some today, about shifting cultural systems in schools, healthcare, businesses, and communities. Dr. Post was recently at the Summer of Positive Psychology with Martin Seligman, and the recently passed Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, to name a few, and was a dear friend of the late Sir John Templeton. As an advisor to the Templeton Foundation and many of Sir John's projects. He has written previously a cracking book called God and Love on Route 80, and today we're going to talk about his new book, Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People, how caregivers can meet the challenges of Alzheimer's disease. Big topic, I know, for all of us here in this call for multiple different reasons. Kim once said that you're the human who's done the most for humanity that she'd ever met, which is powerful considering Kim's network. And I know you've got a lot of humility there, but it's a testament to who you are, Dr. Stephen. And you're also a Positive Prime author, of course, with the session, It's Good to Be Good. And so we're really excited to have you here today and to discuss your new book and this topic, which affects, say, most people in the world at some point in their life.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be with you, Benny and Kim. You always are a miracle in my life. And so it's great to reconnect with you. It's been just a little while, too long.
Today we really want to... Oh, sorry, go on, Kim.
No, Benny. You and I were diving in quickly. Where do we begin? I think, Stephen, you were once referred to by His Holiness the Dalai Lama as one of the greatest living philosophers of our time. Now, I know that you're going to react to that with the same humility that you did with Benny's comment. What actually made you personally, really be the person that decided to investigate and explore the entire subject? That is, why don't we use the word dementia as often as we could? Why is it that you refer to people as deeply forgetful? And why is it you that has written this book?
Well, when I was younger, I'm a little older now, but I'm still immature, so it balances things out. Got to have that. But when I was younger, in my 20s, my grandmother, Post, passed away of what they then called senile dementia. They didn't call it Alzheimer's much at the time. And I spent quite a bit of time with her in a nursing home doing assisted oral feeding. And of course, everybody around said she was demented. Some people said she was gone, she was absent, she was a husk, she was a shell. There were a lot of negative metaphors being floated around, and they weren't very enlightened. But in doing assisted oral feeding with, applesauce and so forth, we connected. It was ritualistic. And every once in a while, she would call me by name. So I realized that we had a relationship that even though she couldn't talk much, she still was there. Deep down underneath all of this silence or maybe confusion, you have to be completely arrogant to say that somehow she's gone. She wasn't. And she had moments of paradoxical lucidity. So I learned all that really with my grandmother, who I love very much. She was actually from Sheffield, England originally. And it was a big influence on my life. So I realized, that the best way to think about these individuals is they're deeply forgetful. They're a little more deeply forgetful than most of us are on any given day. But I'm in a medical school right here. This is my office. It's 400 or 500 medical students, and on any given day, I will forget a number of names, and it's a little bit embarrassing for me, and I stumble and I try to kind of wiggle my way through it. But the other day I was in the parking lot and I couldn't remember where I parked my car, so I asked a poor medical student, "Do you know where my car is parked?" And she said no, and then she laughed. And I realized that I guess it's okay to forget where you parked your car. It's probably not so great to forget if you have a car that's parked. That's probably a significant distinction. But we all struggle with memory and with word finding, and people who are more deeply forgetful than others, they're not unlike us in their experience. They're not somehow less than human, but they've been treated that way a lot of times. And so that's why the book is Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People. But I spent my whole life, 25, 30 years. I was in Sydney about 7 years ago for the big annual meeting on Alzheimer's disease. And I actually walked down the main drag by the Sydney hospital, with all these wonderful folks who were deeply forgetful, but they had memory dogs. They had dogs. These were, Labradors who were nicely trained, and they could lead these people down the road. And there was a taxi driver who pulled over, and he got out of his car and he said, "Blimey, dogs are for blind people." And I said, they're for all these folks too. And there's so much we can do, with music and creative arts. There's so much we can do. And we emphasize, linear rationality, like you're only really human if you can lay out some rational plan and operationalize it. But what's more important than this, procedural rationality is symbolic rationality. I mean, people who are quite deeply forgetful, they can still relate to an article of clothing or a doll or, a rosary bead or something that they connect with in their journey of life. And so, I think that the reasoning of who we are is more important than the reasoning of what we do. And so this book is trying to change that. And it's really nice that Johns Hopkins University Press is publishing it. It's coming out in just a week or two. But I'm really grateful to them. They did a nice job with it. And it's endorsed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Joe Martin, who is the former Dean of Harvard Medical School, and Charlie Scribner of Scribner's Books, all kinds of good people from all sorts of backgrounds, because they all want to try to rethink how we connect. People with dementia, they're not gone, they're just differently abled. It's more of a disability model for them. And I've had so many wonderful stories over the years with these individuals, and I came to love them, and I love their caregivers, and traveled through all the 50 states and all across Canada and all across Europe and even Japan and Sydney, And so I think that we need to take an opportunity here to really revolutionize the kind of inclusivity that we can grow into and learn from deeply forgetful people.
Benny, don't you love how every single word that Professor Stephen G. Post utters is considered? Is it just not extraordinary and delicious to listen to? I hope everybody who's listening agrees with us here.
I don't know, but they love mirth. They love mirth, and if you're good and you catch someone who's deeply forgetful on the right morning after they've had a good night's sleep, they can respond to an uplifting, mirthful joke. Like, I know tomorrow I'm going to be in a nursing home here on the Stony Brook campus. I've got my joke laid out, and the joke is going to be, because they'll all have bunny rabbits and things for Easter. They'll have eggs, so I'm going to ask them, where did the Easter bunny go for breakfast? And then I'll say IHOP, and they'll all crack up laughing. Now, IHOP is a restaurant in the United States that makes pancakes, but it's a good place for a hopping bunny, and they can respond to mirth. They can do beautiful artwork. I was actually in the United States in the Alzheimer's Association. I co-founded the Alzheimer's art movement, and we had this wonderful event in Kansas City. And there was a guy he came in for several mornings with a pad of paper and a pencil that we'd give him, and he just scratched it. It looked like it was total chaos. But in the middle of this paper, there was always a line, actually 2 lines, looked like a little tree or something. And I would ask him, Herb, what is that? Now, he couldn't respond. I hoped I'd get an answer, but I didn't really expect one. And then one morning he said to me, in response to my question, he said, "This is a map so my daughter can find my house." So he was trying to express something with that chaos. And I went to a nursing home in Chardon, Ohio, with my good mentor for many years, Dr. Joseph Foley, a neurologist at Case Med, who recruited me out to Ohio way back in the day. And Joe had a feeling for the deeply forgetful. And so we went into this special care unit, and there was a bio sketch on the wall of a room, and it was about a guy named Jim. And it said, he had two sons, Tuck and William, and it talked a little bit about his life. So we asked the nurse to, introduce us to Jim. So he took us to Jim, and I escorted Jim to a table. I sat him down. I said, "Jim, how are your sons?" And he got nervous. He couldn't respond because I was putting pressure on him to remember their name. But when I said, "Hey, how's Tuck?" Suddenly he lit up. "Oh, he's fine. He's doing great." Because I was using language to cue him. A lot of this book is about how to actually communicate and sort of fill in the gaps for these folks. So then the guy, Jim, he had a painted white twig, and he put this twig in my hand, and I couldn't figure it out. And when he did that, he smiled. He was aglow. And if joy was electric, I'm telling you, Kim, that place would have been on fire. And I just couldn't believe it. So I gave him back his twig. And then I asked the nurse, "So what's the story about Jim and his twig?" Well, he grew up on a farm in Ohio, and he loved his father very much. And like a lot of these people, he would gone back in time to the place where he felt really secure, tender, loving care. That happens, So that's where he was at. And his father gave him one big chore every day, which was to bring kindling in for the fireplace. So that piece of wood, that piece of kindling, was his symbolic source of meaning and attachment. That's why I say, symbolic rationality, the rationality of who we are. He knew somehow who he was wrapped up with that twig, And so then there was a doll on the floor. Now, I don't know if you've seen these in Australia, but this was a beat up rag puppet doll, the kind of thing that a little girl would put on her hand. It was a lion doll, actually. And it had obviously seen better days, which is to say looked like it was about 75 or 80 years old. There wasn't much fur on it or anything. My goodness, So Jim, he ambulates very slow, and he bends down and he picks up this doll. And then there's a woman in the corner of the unit, which was, a pretty decent sized unit, and she was whimpering. And he walked over to her and he put the doll on her lap, and she stopped crying. And then I asked the nurse, "What's the story with the doll?" And that was her doll, and she was really attached to it. And once she had that, she stopped crying. So there was a culture of love. See, this is what I want to say to everybody in Positive Prime, There is nothing that can separate us from the power of love, not even deep forgetfulness. Please remember I said that. There's nothing that can separate us from the power of love, not even deep forgetfulness. And I said that for every caregiver, for everybody with a diagnosis, and it's true. And that's what this book is about. It's about the power of love for people maybe who need it the most.
Letting those words sink in, they're ones to carry with you for the rest of your life, I believe. My experience with Alzheimer's is my grandmother passed away 4 years ago. So the applesauce brings back memories as well. And I'm grateful for your work, and I'm really excited to read the book and pass it on to my mother, Jenny, as well, because I think she would find great comfort in that with her mother, Joyce. She spent a lot of time with her. And I'm really hearing in what you're saying about, and even in your experience, where the family wasn't that positive, loving spark of light for the person, and we kind of see them as this shell, or however you want to call it. And so I'd love to just hear a little bit more about why we desperately need positivity in these circumstances. And that's kind of from the range of people who are a little bit more forgetful through to people who are, you know, in those being cared for full time. So I'd love to hear, because that's so important to our community.
Yeah. Well, you know, deeply forgetful individuals are always going to surprise you. There's something called, and I actually coined this term. I wrote a book in 1995 called The Moral Challenge of Alzheimer's Disease, that the British Medical Association designated a medical classic of the 20th century. Now, that is shocking for a guy who writes a book about God and love 180. But anyway, that's surprising in itself. But, you know, bottom line for me, there is this lucidity that will occasionally just erupt. And so I coined this term paradoxical lucidity. And our National Institutes of Health has a division called the National Institute on Aging. 4 years ago, they actually put out a request for proposals nationally for the study of paradoxical lucidity. What's going on with these people who have just sort of been, you know, chinned down and not communicating? And, you know, maybe they're stimulated through personalized music, or maybe they're just there and suddenly they're more insightful. They get somatic. You can connect with them. They get their emotions lighten up. What's going on there? So we just published a month ago. I had to send this to Kim. A 14-page long article in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences on paradoxical lucidity, involving professors, you know, researchers from 14 different universities. It was based at NYU Langone, and essentially said, you know, this is real. It can be studied, and we can learn a lot about neurology and dementia through focusing on these positive moments, these moments of insight, of return, of continuity. And so we don't have to think about a person as dead, gone, absent. You know, one of my dearest friends in life, Pastor Otis Moss, who was the head of Morehouse College for many years, a great friend of Martin Luther King, and he ran the institutional Olivet Baptist Church in the inner city of Cleveland. And he wrote the foreword to Why Good Things Happen to Good People. Great guy, you know, amazing. He's probably about 86 now. So his sister had Alzheimer's, and she was from Detroit. They were from Detroit. And we were talking on the phone, and I was saying, she's now passed away. I said, Pastor Moss, was there ever a time when you were there with your sister and you thought she was gone? And he said, well, not really, but there were times when it seemed that way. And I said, Pastor Moss, let me give you my take on this. This is a guy who introduced me to Obama in his church when Why Good Things Happen came out. So, he's a greatly distinguished African-American leader. I said, I think your sister is just fooling you. I think she's gone down to the Amtrak station. That's our big train system in the U.S. And she's already got 1 foot on that blessed train for glory. So, you know, maybe she's ahead of us, I said. And then, you know, he responded, and his response, his email is really beautiful. He said, you know, thinking of these individuals not as demented, which is such a negative term, you know, I mean, gosh, but as deeply forgetful. He said, you know, it makes them a part of the beloved community, which was a Martin Luther King term, you know, beloved community. And I feel like language is so important, you know, for creating that community. But I think everybody needs to realize there are ways of communicating. Never ask someone with dementia, what would you like for breakfast? Because you put them on the spot. What if you say, would you like an omelet or post toasties? They'll say, oh, I want an omelet. And also music, personalized music. I know you're aware of that in Australia, but, you know, down the road here in Mineola, New York, there's a guy named Dan Cohen who started the Music and Memory movement. You can Google it. It's musicandmemory.org, I think, or .com. And, you know, people who have not been communicating for a long time, if you play personalized music, like for me, I guess it would be the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, stuff they identify with from earlier on in life. That really dates me, but I can remember it like yesterday. With this sun shining, sitting on a fence, listening to a radio. You know, if you play that, people will get somatic, they'll get rhythmic, because that's so deep evolutionarily in what we are as human beings. and then that will stimulate their memory, and they'll start chiming in for a line or a verse. And then afterwards, for at least a few minutes, about half of them can actually respond to carefully phrased questions, which is completely surprising. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing for the caregivers, because now, the caregivers, I mean, look, they're under stress. It's not easy. What they're doing is hard as could be. And, they have a little higher depression rates than the baseline population. I mean, if you give them some respite care and support them with more than scraps, which is all we have in the US for them, but if you had a society that really cared about these people, you'd give them more. But, when they realize that their loved one is still there, one of the chapters in this book is Grandma's still there. And if they can say, I think she is there underneath things, which is the truth, then it's inspiring for them, because they don't feel like they're just spinning their wheels or wasting their time, that they're actually contributing meaningfully to a life that's just okay. I up here on my wall. Okay, I'm going to show you. This is a letter from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's a beautiful letter. I was invited to Bangalore to the Institute for Advanced Studies. This is now, wow, oh my God, December 2015, before COVID and all this stuff. And I went to Bangalore, beautiful airport. I went to the Institute for Advanced Studies, and there were a lot of Hindu philosophers, Hindu neuroscientists, Hindu physicians. They kind of filled up this big ballroom. And the title of the conference was Consciousness, Cognition, and Culture, Implications for the 21st Century. And I gave a plenary there on deep forgetfulness. And I said, you know what? In the Western world, sorry for the philosophers, I love you, but I got to say this, we put too much emphasis on like linear rationality, like Kant and John Locke. They tell you, you're really a human being. You're really a person of moral consideration. If you can make plans and operationalize them, and you're an active agency. But that just drives me nuts, because my grandmother was not an active agent, but she was there, and she could still call me by name, and she still loved M&M's chocolate peanuts. By the way, the problem was that she sucked the candy and the chocolate off the nuts, and then she put them back in the bowl, and then she gave them to me. And you were going to ask, did I ever eat those things? No way. No way did I do that. But, it's the symbolic rationality. So I said, it doesn't matter that somebody's memory weakened. What matters is that they're still there, and they have consciousness, and they can enjoy the beautiful autumn breeze. They can enjoy the colors in the leaves. They can enjoy music. They can do artwork, all kinds of things. And I said, okay, so they're not as economically productive or linear as most of us are, but I'm not the most linear thinker in the world either. I'm sure Kim will tell you that. And it's Benny, you'll learn that. I'm like sort of wildly all over the place. But, I think that I told them, I said, it's consciousness that really matters. They're conscious of the world around them, and they're still part of, if you want to get spiritual about it, they're still part of the one mind. I'm sort of like Larry Dossey. I don't think our minds just evolved from tissue and cells and so forth. I think that our minds are a gift, and that we participate in something much more mysterious than we really understand. I mean, it's a mystery. Let's just honestly say it's a mystery. So I gave this talk about love for the deeply forgetful in India. And this guy had walked in during my talk, and he was sitting in the very back of the room. This is a big room. And I squinted, and I thought maybe I recognized him, because he had these big saffron robes on and stuff. So nobody really batted an eye. It was His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And apparently, like, he hangs out there a bit. He likes, it's where he gets some of his ideas and so forth. And he stood up after my talk, and he put his hand down on the table, and he said, yes, there is no reason to think that a person who is deeply forgetful is in any way less valuable than anyone else. And that was it. And that's what this is about. It's about opening the beloved community to these individuals who, when politicians they want to pile on to somebody they don't like, to say, oh, they're demented. You hear this is used in a very derogatory way. And sometimes, I've seen, I was standing in front of an elder healthcare center in Cleveland, at the Cleveland Clinic, and there was a guy, I'm sure he was a good man, his wife was riding in the passenger seat. They pulled up and she couldn't remember how to open up the door. And I could hear him shouting at her, open up the door, damn it, open up the door. And she couldn't open up the door. So finally, he just got so angry. He didn't hit her, but it was amazing. And then I just walked over to the door myself, because I was standing in the entranceway, and I opened up the door for this lady, and I helped her in. The driver, the guy, he was a little bit ashamed of himself, but it's understandable. I mean, he was that frustrated, and so what we need to understand is that people are more than hypercognitive values. That's a term in the book. In 1994, sitting with a bunch of neurologists at Case Med School, I said, the problem is we have hypercognitive values. We think that if anybody doesn't reach this level of cognitive capacity, somehow they're not worth it to us. But look at, Dostoevsky's The Idiot, all these people who have sort of beautiful spiritual histories and patterns in life. There was a guy we had who was really kind of rough and tough. He had a bad reputation in Shaker Heights, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. He got demented. And you know what he did? He started riding. He insisted on riding in the passenger seat in the front of a van that would carry older adults to the elder healthcare, to the Joseph Foley Elder Healthcare Center. And he would escort them out of the van. He would very meticulously and lovingly bring them into the art room. And so his kindness, Kim, and Benny, it was disinhibited. It was disinhibited. Because a lot of us, here's what happens. So, let me tell you a story. So we wrote an article in a journal of health psychology about widows and widowers, important point, who had been happily married, for quite a long time. And now they're going through a period of grief and bereavement, not celebration, okay? Grief and bereavement. And that's not easy. So we found out that if they could self-report that they were helping other people in the neighborhood or volunteering formally, they were getting through this process more quickly and in a deeper, enduring way. So that was news. It made it, got in some of the newspapers. And I got a call, I was sitting right here. I got a call from the New York Society of Widows and Widowers. There is such a thing, you can believe it. And they were having an annual conference right in the middle of Manhattan at one of the big hotels there. So they said, would you come in and give a talk? So I give this talk. And there's probably 1,000 people there. And at the end, I had, time for Q&A. And there was a guy in the back of the room. And he was waving his hands. He was like frantic. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I was telling him, if you can help others, it will let you deal with your disappointment, with your depression, with your suffering, with your, you'll be okay. You'll be better. You will benefit. He said, I don't care what you say, buddy. I don't do nothing for nothing. And I didn't know what to say. But see, what's happened with that guy, you could give him enough scientific information, it could fill a book on why it's good to be good. You're going to live a happier, healthier, and probably a little longer life, about 2 years on average, depending on how you look at the figures. But, he was so caught in to this negative thing that, like, I don't do nothing for nothing. I don't do anything for anybody unless I get a clear payback, and it's a calculation. It's a transaction. He was a transactional dude, So this guy in Shaker Heights, this is a contrast. This guy, maybe he'd been a transactional guy most of his life, but now he was forgetting all about that. So that's what liberated him. He was actually liberated, right, by his forgetfulness, because he couldn't remember those stupid negative myths that deny the reality of human independence interdependence and vulnerability. I mean, we think we're all so independent. We think we're so invulnerable, but that's completely untrue. Because when you come into this world and you're born, you're totally dependent on your mom. You're totally vulnerable, and you're going to be like that in life at various points when you're ill and so forth. And probably when you get really old, you're going to have those moments as well. So we live in this stupid myth that somehow we're much more independent and invulnerable than we are. So this guy in Shaker Heights, from what I could understand, I mean, from his family and so forth, I mean, that was really him. But now he's got dementia, and he's totally liberated. And he can be kind and generous and loving to strangers. Bravo.
I love that story. I do. Stephen, I have to get you to comment on reminiscence therapy and positive psychology and what we do at Positive Prime. And I am known to advise all of our subscribers to personalize their Positive Prime sessions and upload lots of photographs that are meaningful and significant to them. And so I would love it if you could just comment a little bit on if we actually anchor ourselves when we are more, let's say, when we're less forgetful, which some might assume when we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even though someone like me who's had their heart stop flatline for periods of time, several times, sometimes we have more trouble than most people remembering words or saying the wrong words. And we're like, where did that come from? That is not the right word for this context. But is there something we can do that you've learned that helps to actually strengthen our mind? Or is that all BS? Can we anchor memories prior to us forgetting them? And can we stave off?
Well, that's a really great question. I believe from my own experience that if we are mindful and we visualize, we can deepen our memories. So I get up in the morning, I'm an early riser, been married 40 years. My wife, she still can't really adjust to it, but I'm up about 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. And, I meditate and then I kind of think about the day. I think about the people I know I'm going to meet. I run a whole department. I'm a division head in a medical school. I mean, it's just almost hopelessly overwhelming at times. And I do have a pretty good idea though, because I keep a hard copy calendar book. You all have your iPhones and stuff. I keep everything in my, look at this. It's ridiculous. I sort of keep this by my desk, and I know all the people I'm going to be seeing. And I do a dress rehearsal. I visualize and I think about these people. I'll just take a couple of minutes for each person. And I do have a little chant that I offer, which, I can tell it to you if you won't be embarrassed. Okay. I'm never embarrassed.
No way. I won't be. I probably do something very similar. Maybe you actually told me once before and I actually have adopted it.
Yeah.
Do share.
Well, I say now, Lord, may your bright, white, healing light surround X, protecting them, healing them in mind, heart, and body, and bestowing upon them your greatest blessings. And I say that, and I visualize them and I think about what their needs are. So that's where, I'm still a why good things happen type person. That book is still my book because, there's this circle of love and the inner circle is just love itself, which is what? Is that love of designers, jeans, or chocolate? Well, I got nothing against those things, but I use this definition, which is very everyday. When the happiness and the security of another is as meaningful to you as your own, and sometimes more so, you love that person. So there's still self-love there. This works because if you imagine yourself, say you're a parent and you're looking over a child's crib, or a grandparent, or maybe you're just spending time with an old friend who's struggled and you're drinking coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. I like the artwork. I'm kidding. But or you just know, some people, by the way, like Dame Cicely Saunders had a special feeling for people who were dying, so she started the first hospices. Not quite, actually, hospice evolved out of Australia. Some people don't realize that before she even started. But this is really important. So you gotta think about the different expressions of that love, because people get a little anxious about the word love in everyday life. So I run a Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics here in this medical school. I will happily say 2 years ago won the National Award from Alpha Omega Alpha as the most successful culturally transformative division in any medical school in America. So half the medical students here, they study compassionate care. They do these beautiful courses, how to meditation, mindfulness, skill techniques in communicating with patients under different disease conditions. So that's my day job. It's my day job. So what are the real expressions of love that people can relate to without getting anxious? And so one is loyalty. Like I can imagine, and I'll do that tomorrow at 5 a.m. I know somebody who was just ditched by their spouse. And I'm going to come in when I talk with them and I'm going to say to them something like, I know this must be hard, and sometimes people don't stick with you or anybody. It's just human nature. But I said, you can always count on me. I'm going to be here and I'm going to be loyal. And that's what I want you to know. And that'll be all I'll say. And there might be somebody else who's got a big project going on and they're really stumbling. They can't get it moving forward. And so I'll come in with a creative idea and I'll say, hey, you ever thought of this? Because creativity can be an expression of love. Just simple helping can be an expression of love, going into a patient's room and saying, is there anything I can do to make your stay here a little easier? And they might say, well, I could use a cup of iced tea with lemon. So you go out and you get it. It's not a big deal. Simple kindness is an expression of love. So that doesn't mean empathy in the sense of, really listening attentively, although empathy is an expression of love, but, sort of reflecting back and letting them know that you listened and heard them. But it's simpler than that. It's just taking a gentle curiosity. Hey, how are you? How's your kids? You feeling okay? Simple things, And I did every day I walked in this place. I've been in all through this COVID thing, 3 years. I've been here every single day. And I've counseled with a lot of COVID families. And, there were always a couple of nurses up the hallway, and they were there to sort of, get people's temperatures with these rays and so forth. And their lives looked, they did this every day, day in and day out. And sometimes they looked morose. So I started coming in and I told them silly jokes, silly little jokes, what's the Irish definition of hospitality? Benny?
I'm not sure.
How would you? You make someone feel perfectly at home while you be a wishing they were. Because that's true. Like, so you invite someone over and the party's over at 8 or 9 and they're still there. It's 12 o'clock. Come on, you're hospitable, but you're really not happy about it. Anyway, I could go on, but I just asked them. I gave them sort of, so I come in from the post office and I say to them, hey, what did the envelope say to the stamp? And do you know this one? Stick with me and we'll go places. So that's why Good Things Happen, mirth is an expression of love. The thing about mirth, and this is so important in positive psychology, with mirth, I don't mean derisive humor, but I mean uplifting, tasteful humor that's surprising. You can change people in a millisecond, not even once, in a millisecond, a millisecond. Suddenly they reframe their world. So you got to be able to think about love in, compassion. Some people really are suffering and you need to be very attentive and very compassionate. And there are all kinds of other expressions of love. Courage can be an expression of love. Humility is important. So I try to think about what the people around me need. And I visualize that. I actually, I envision it as best I can. And when I have those encounters, they go better. And I also remember them, I think, better as a result. And I'm more deeply connected with my daily experience. Now, doesn't mean I'm not perfect. Okay, forget that. Hopefully, after I've done this exercise in the morning, now it's about 6 and I'm driving into work. I drive on this road 25A, and there's a light. I have to turn left to go to the hospital. And every once in a while, the person in front of me will actually stop unnecessarily at a yellow light. And when they do that, it means I've got to wait another 5 minutes because it's a really complicated curve. And I'm perfectly capable of falling full-chested on my horn. I don't usually yell out an expletive, but so even if you try to set the day up well, you can still lose your inner compass. But that's mostly what positive psychology is about. And it's about all the different kinds of things that it's about. You know how positive psychology really got started. This is Sir John Templeton's book, The Worldwide Laws of Life. And he produced this book 30 years ago. He's been dead since 2008. But look what it's got. It's the essential worldwide laws of life. Forgiveness, humility, love, giving thanks, finding joy, pursuing your dreams, celebrating success, discovering life's purpose. So Sir John, I knew Sir John a long time, and we were very close. And he wanted a scientist to come along and take these kinds of ideas and really bring the best research possible, just like you would study, psychiatric illnesses, anxieties, depression, bipolar, whatever. He thought that these things were worthy of the same sort of attention. So in 1998, with a guy named Arthur Schwartz and some others, we introduced Sir John Templeton to Marty Seligman, who was at University of Pennsylvania, and this was at the Marriott Hotel. This is the birthplace of positive. The Marriott Hotel on Market Street near Broad in downtown Philadelphia. And what happened there was that Marty, he was wanting to turn positive, but he was well known for studying learned helplessness in dogs. Like if you smack a dog enough, at a certain point, it's not going to get up off the floor. And this no longer excited him. But I'm being a little facetious, but basically he wanted to turn positive. And Sir John was looking for a brilliant scientist, and Marty was the head of the American Psychiatric Association at the time. And so the two of them got together, and it was like magic. And so then Sir John, he dropped probably $15-20 million in a grant to Marty at Penn to start that movement. And that first summer, which was the summer of 2000, by the way, you're right. I was the token. Sir John wanted me there to represent spirituality. And so you had Csikszentmihalyi, you had Bob Emmons, doing gratitude. You had Ev Worthington doing forgiveness. You had Mike McCullough. You had all these people, Bob Enright doing happiness, and of course, Marty himself. It was incredible. George Valiant, the great Harvard psychiatrist, doing resilience. It was unbelievable. And that went on for about 6 or 7 weeks. And that is where the idea, Chris Peterson was there. So eventually Chris and Marty would do the handbook of positive psychology, character strengths and virtues. And I was able to write the section on kindness in there. And we figured it out. So we wanted to describe these character strengths, these positive strengths. We wanted to look at what we knew about how they contributed to health. We wanted to look at where we needed to learn more. We wanted to suggest a path forward. And that's what happened. And that book, has huge influence. Never had to be redone. But yeah, that's positive psychology, is all these wonderful things. And so I'm really happy because now, why good things happen to good people was a sort of a broad-based positive psychology thing. But I got to show you one other thing, which I use with my medical students. And here it is. Okay, this came out about a year ago. Positive psychology approaches to dementia. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? It's an edited book. It's very, very good. And look, it's got well-being, hope, humor and dementia, resilience and living well with dementia, growth, creativity, spirituality and wisdom. It goes on. And so that's what I say, you know, when you think about positive psychology and when you think about the power of love, which to me underlies all positive psychology, you know, you got to include this population. And there are a lot of people, I mean, dementia is a syndrome. It's not a disease. It's a cluster of symptoms. And, you know, 100 years ago, the main cause of dementia was neurosyphilis. People didn't live so long, but they didn't have antibiotics. And now, you know, there's like 20 different diseases, you know, chronic traumatic encephalitis, the concussion stuff, Parkinson's, it goes on and on and on. And so there's so many different diseases that cause dementia. And all of them, you know, the main precipitating factor is age itself. So as people live to be older and older, you know, this gets to be a very major problem. And we're going to have positive psychology and love for the deeply forgetful, or we're just going to be out of business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so to finish on a beautiful note, what can you and I do today? What can we do today? Express our love, express our thanks, show kindness, be considerate.
Yeah, simple
Put our compassion hat on.
Yeah, just do simple things, you know? I mean, that's why I like, you've known me actually for like 15 years, I think.
I was just thinking about that diner in your favorite diner that you took me to
the TikTok,
in Manhattan.
Yeah, the TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that's where I sat with Victor, what is his last name? Victor Chan, who writes things with his holiness. And we figured out in that diner that we were going to engineer or help engineer getting His Holiness the Dalai Lama the Templeton Prize. John Vanier, same thing, you know. So I met with people from L'Arche in that diner, and I kept, you know, I was on this committee. I'm not on it. I haven't been on it in a long time, but I was always meeting people in the TikTok diner to try to think if we could move the right people forward to get the Templeton Prize. And I love the TikTok diner. It's a home away from home. I've gone there since I was 6 years old. You know, my parents used to bring me into New York, and you know, my brother and my sister and me, we'd go in there, and at that time it was not dangerous in New York, so we could wander around 8th Avenue and 34th Street, and it was really something else. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just the little things, you know. I mean, I have to always be mindful. I think mindfulness is so important. Just be aware of what's going on in your heart, and if you're and don't try to be an intellectual. I mean, my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes, I have three. One of my favorite quotes is from Proverbs 7, and it says, you know, as a person, as a man or woman, as a person thinketh, so are they. As they thinketh in their heart, so are they. As a person thinketh, as man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So we don't just think with our intellect, we think with our heart. And if you want to survive and prosper in a university, don't become a hyper-cognitive, hyper-rational, arrogant son of a gun. Just do things from the heart. And that's all I've ever done. And I've been pretty successful. My other favorite quotes, okay, Eleanor Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt's wife, she said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." So, you know, you go through the day and there are going to come times when you just feel dispirited and you're wondering where your dreams fit in this world, and the world's a difficult place, and you're navigating all kinds of pitfalls, but you just got to remember that the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And then the third one is from a theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr, who was at Columbia University. There's a street named after him up like around 117th Street near Rockefeller Cathedral. And he said, "The children of light must have the cunning of the children of darkness, but none of their malice." Because let me tell you, there's malice all around. I mean, don't you think that, you know, to survive with a program like mine in a hyper scientific environment, I mean, some people, it just blows them away, and yet, I mean, I could be in a divinity school. I've never wanted to do that. I want to be in these environments that are very challenging, but there's always some sharks in the water, not anymore, but there were, and you just have to love them. So can I tell you one little story? Okay, so I came here from Cleveland. I wasn't really happy. I've been 20 years at Case Western Medical School, and I've been running the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love, and it was going well. But there were some political issues, and they offered me a job here. And they wanted me to run my own program and do a lot on compassionate care and really teach a whole cohort of young doctors the how-to of this. And we've done pretty well, got all kinds of recognition for this. But the first night we got here, we were in the Three Village Inn, which is in the village of Stony Brook, right on the North Shore, right on the ocean. And it had seen better days. It's one of those places George Washington slept here. That was a while back, He really did, So it needed a paint job, and there was, I won't say too much, but it wasn't the greatest place. And my wife and my son were with me, and my son got a text message from somebody back in Shaker Heights, Ohio. Hey, Andrew, where are you? It's soccer practice. Oh no. And then it kind of dawned on him that, oh my God, we're not home anymore. And my wife, what have you done? It was the worst night of my life. So there was nothing I could say, Benny. I mean, there's nothing I could say, So I got out in the car and I just drove down the road, not really knowing where he was going, but I said, as I was leaving, and it was raining, it was thunder, it was lightning, I said, I'm gonna get some pizza. That's what we do in America. We got a real problem, we gotta get some pizza. So I go down 25A and I'm in Setauket, it's just a couple miles away. And there is Little Joe's Pizzeria. And I go in there and there is a newspaper that I've never seen before called the Three Village Herald, which is like the north coast of Long Island. And it's local news. And the only headline on the front page in big, huge, bold letters, Unlimited Love Comes to Stony Brook. Because, I founded this institute with Sir John, the Unlimited Love Institute. And I was fine with that language, although, you're going to get a certain flack for that. You're going to get a certain amount of flack for that. I took a copy of this paper, I got the pizza and I went back to the Three Village Inn. And then the next morning I called the university president, Shirley Kenny, and I asked her, I said, Shirley, did you see the Three Village Herald? She said, yeah, I saw that. I said, well, did you get any phone calls or anything about it? And she said, yeah, I did. I got some phone calls this morning. I said, who called you? She said, emeritus professors. And I said, oh, she said, male emeritus professors. Well, what did they ask you? She said, they want to know, what kind of love are we talking about? And I thought that was fun. So we both laughed. But then, astonishingly, I come first day coming into this building. This is, a major medical school on the East Coast. I'm going up the escalator, and there's a guy standing up at the top. He's like at L3, and I'm going up from L2 to L3. It's a big escalator, and he's got burly arms, and he's in his summertime. It's actually July, and he's wearing a t-shirt, and he kind of looks like Mr. Clean. I don't know if you have Mr. Clean in Australia. You do, but the average, Mr. Burly, big Mr. Clean, and he's looking at me, and I look up at him, and I say, "Sir is a good word to use. Do I know you?" And he says, "Are you Dr. Post?" in a very sort of Eastern European accent. And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, first words, "Are you going to save us?" He'd obviously read that article in the Three Village Herald. And these people are like, ardent secularists for the most part. They're super biologists. They're great people, but they're not going to get into sort of the physics and the spirit of unlimited love and ultimate reality. Okay, this is not going to happen. So I said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to save everybody, but I'm going to do my best. And what I learned that day, and this is what I want to leave everybody with, okay? If you're going to get through life with positive psychology, you have to expand the canvas, because there are always going to be those moments when it looks like everything's just collapsed. There's a book about, when everything goes wrong, it's going to happen. And I thought everything kind of had gone wrong with that article. I thought, oh my God, what credibility am I going to have in this place? And yet, it worked out so beautifully. And it's like Jackson Pollock is the artist who did those sort of wild psychedelic things. But he just started with a big gob of gooey, ugly gray paint on the middle of a canvas on the floor of his barn out about 50 miles from here in East Hampton in Sands. And he just threw that stuff down. It looked like hell. But what did he do? He covered it with these beautiful, energetic lines. So beautiful. And in the end, it was mystical. It was so beautiful. It was awesome, ineffably beautiful. And that's the lesson that you got to learn about life is an expanding canvas. And you always have to take things that look really difficult, even crazy difficult, and you have to expand the canvas. And the best way to do that is through love. You just, I'm come in every day into this building and I'm going to love people and I'm going to pay a lot of attention. I'm going to be a good listener. I'm going to be this and that and the other. Just win with love. And that's how you expand the canvas. And then what looks like it was, that was the worst night of my life in the Three Village Inn, worst night of my life. But everything's okay. Everything's good. It's better than okay. It's probably was, I think, it was a Route 80 miracle that I went from Cleveland to New York. But anyway, long story short, that I had that fight with my family about where I was working that summer. I had a copy of Siddhartha in my wallet, in my pocket, and I was working in Bill DeBono's lampshade factory. And after 2 weeks, it wasn't gonna happen. So I took Dad's gray Mercedes 190 out to West Hampton Beach, where I actually was just this past Sunday having lunch with some people from New York. About 11 at night, I said, I'm not working in the factory anymore, and I'm not going to argue with my father and mom about college and what I'm doing. I'm just following the dream. So I drove down the Sunrise Highway 27 to the Midtown Tunnel, and I went through Manhattan, and I got to the other side, and I went over the George Washington Bridge, and the first thing I saw was a sign that said 95 South. But the road in the dream was heading to the west. So there was another sign next to it that said Route 80 West. And I went on that road, and I got about 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, in the middle of Pennsylvania. The sun is rising, and I'm thinking I'm going to turn around. I'm thinking I'm going to turn around and go home and restore my reputation so no one will ever remember that I did this. But the universe had a different idea. This is Alchemy 101. And cars had generators at that time. The generator broke, and all the current was dead. The engine was dead, and I could just barely, even though I'd been thinking about getting around on the midway and going home, the best thing I could do was get on the shoulder on the right. And there I was stuck, and there was nothing around. There were no cell phones obviously in that era, but there were nothing, but fields. So I took a piece of paper out of the glove compartment, and I wrote a note that changed my life. You talk about, authorship. In pencil, on paper, to the Pennsylvania State Police, please return this car to Henry A.V. Post, 44 Davison Lane East, West Islip, New York, 516-669-5655. That was the phone number. From his son, Stephen, who no longer works in the lampshade factory. And that's what I did. I put my thumb out. I had my Siddhartha book, my classical guitar, a few little articles of clothing, and I went west. But the thing about the dream, which was really where my life began, I think, because in the dream, there was a kid on the left who was about to jump off a bridge, and he had blonde, stringy hair, and I didn't know what to make of it. But then all the mist disappeared, and it was bright, and this blue face said to me, "If you save him, you too shall live." I didn't know what to do with that. I mean, Charlie still, we thought it was just gobbledygook, something that some kid would dream up, But I got a really bad draft number. I was living in the Mission District with my cousin George Beret, George Lamont, who'd done 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. And George was a great guy. So he let me sleep on the floor, and I played classical guitar in Hispanic restaurants. And I got involved in a community that chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, kind of a Nichiren Shoshu thing. And I loved that because it was kind of mystical and it was very beautiful. But I got this really bad draft number. So I called the people at Reed College, which I had turned down because I was going to go to Swarthmore. And I said, look, I don't want to go to Vietnam, so can you open up a spot for me? And they said, yeah. So standing in front of the temple at Chenery Street and Market, about 7 a.m. with George, Gus, a few other people, they gave me this thing called a Gohon zone, which is a scroll. And it's got some Japanese symbols on it, which Gus had explained to me, like, one mind, one heart, things that were really quite beautiful in Japanese symbols. And so I put it in my backpack. I caught the bus. I got to the Golden Gate Park, and I walked across it, and there was this entrance to it with a pedestrian walkway on the left over some rocks, and it was so foggy I really couldn't see more than like really about a foot in front of me. And so I was walking very carefully. I got to the middle of the bridge, and I heard this scratching noise, and I looked to my left, and I kind of made out, squinting, the face of this kid who had scrawny blonde, dirty blonde hair, and he looked like he was about to jump. And so I looked at him and I said, "Excuse me, but I truly hope you don't plan to jump." And then he got so pissed off at me, he started screaming curses, and he was even screaming Macbeth, life is empty nothingness and all that stuff. And I told him, it sounds a lot more real when you're out there on the edge of a bridge about to jump than it did in Memorial Hall when we did that at St. Paul's. And I said, look, I think I'm here for a reason, to meet you. I think maybe it's just possible I saw you in a dream. So I explained in about 15 to 20 minutes, because I went slow. I said, I had this dream, and everybody thought I was a little unusual, but they tolerated me well, and and it was okay. And I was a good student. I hadn't been out raking too many leaves in the hot sun to work off my demerits or anything like that. And I had this fight with my family, and I wasn't going to work in the lampshade factory. I explained the lampshade factory. So I stole the car and I left it in the middle of Pennsylvania with a note to the police. Police returned, and so I said, I think you're the guy I saw to my left in this dream. And then he got really mad. He started cursing, but then I said, look, I got an idea. I have something I'm going to give to you. And if I give this to you, it's going to change your life. Because in the Buddhists, sometimes, sometimes they'll have little tokens that are like lucky charms. And I said, if you come over the railing to where I am, I'm going to give you something that's going to change your luck for good. And he's still cursing, but he calmed down. He started to calm down. And then he came over, and I pulled out my Gohon zone, and I said, this is for you. And I unscrolled it. And there I explained some of the symbols as best I could, because I really hadn't learned much about them. And I said, if you take this, your life is going to turn around. Then I gave him a note to Cousin George. Cousin George was a bit of an entrepreneur. If you ever heard of Lamont gloves, gardening gloves, that was George. So, he was a North Carolina Chapel Hill graduate, Chinese studies. He was an amazing guy. I said, dear George, this is Harry. Could you please let him sleep on your floor where I was sleeping, and bring him down to the temple and introduce him to Gus, and just look after him for a while. So Harry took my Gohon zone. I gave him some money. He took my note, and he walked south on the bridge, and I walked north. And as I walked north, I waved goodbye, and then all the mist, all the clouds just totally evaporated. And it was like bright blue, radiant blue, not just regular blue, but radiant blue. And I felt somehow like that was the Blue Angel again in my life. I got down to the bottom of the bridge. I put my thumb out. This red Ford truck comes along, and this guy opens the door. He says, where are you going? I said, Portland, Oregon. And he says, jump in. That's where we're headed. And he says, my name's Wayne Dill. I said, okay. And then his wife was in the passenger seat. She said, and I'm Dorothy Dill. Yep. D-I-L-L, just like in dill pickle. I never forgot that. And I got up to Oregon, but I wondered, so if you save him, you too shall live. Well, I thought maybe I'd save this kid, but what about the rest of the statement? So late in January, and Steve Jobs was at Reed College at the time. It was an interesting era. We're sitting in the coffee shop, and it doesn't snow in Oregon, but it rains all the time. It's like UK, it's like London. rains like Oxford, rains all the time. And so, it's like 9 o'clock at night. And this guy comes bounding into the coffee house, and he's got a leather biker jacket on. He looks lit up. His hair is red and flamey. He says, "Who wants to go for a ride on my brand new Harley Davidson Shovelhauser?" That was the fastest bike of its time. And I'd never ridden on a motorcycle. So I said, "I'll go." So I went out and I jumped on his motorcycle. And he took off. Literally, he hit like 140. He went through every red light, every stop sign, and then he turned south on the Pacific Coast Highway. And for an hour, he hit 180. And it was raining, and it was icy, and he was swirling. And I thought I was dead. I really thought this was it. I mean, I was actually crying. And lo and behold, the guy did this incredible sort of Evel Knievel turn, and he took me back to Portland. He dropped me off exactly where he picked me up in front of the Reed College coffee shop. And then I staggered across this bridge to Ackerman Dormitory, where Jobs had slept on my floor, by the way, in the rain at times. And I never picked up, there's a payphone on the wall. I never picked up a payphone. I mean, my mother knew the number, but I gave it to her, but I never picked up the phone. The phone rang, and I was walking by it, and I literally felt pushed toward the phone. I looked behind me, I didn't see anything. I didn't see any light or anything, but I just felt this incredible energy pushing me toward the phone. So I picked up the phone and I said, "Hello." And my God, so now it's 11 o'clock Pacific Coast time. It's 2 o'clock in New York. It's my mother. She says, I woke up. I had this terrible fear that you were dead. I was sweating. I couldn't sleep anymore. I had to call you. Are you okay? And I said, "Mom, I thought I was dead too." And we talked about that. And somehow or another, that was the second half of the statement. If you save him, you too shall live. I think somehow or another, by helping that kid on the bridge, maybe my life was saved on that wild ride. And in both events, you got to remember that, we're talking 3,000 miles away. I mean, New Hampshire's 3,000 miles from San Francisco. And it was 2 years earlier that I'd had the dream. It was a recurring dream, but 2 years earlier. So time, place, space meant nothing. And then my mother, and mothers have premonitions about their kids when they get in danger. It's very well documented, but she's 3,000 miles away. And what's going on here? So I realized, so from that time in my life, when I was 17, I realized without any doubt, and I've always had this conviction that, number one, we are much more loved than we understand by, you're talking metaphysics, Betty, that's what got me into this, We're much more loved than we understand by some ineffable energy of original mind and original heart underlying the universe. That was totally demonstrated to me at that time in my life, and I never got away from it. So all my life, I've just been living out the dream. So the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams.
Amen. Hallelujah. Absolutely.